Yeah, you would just, it's laughable, actually. You're going to like, that's just so, like, no more than you go back to the phone from 1970 with the cord. It's like, you've seen the, like, no, we don't do that anymore. That's just dumb.
Yeah.
Other than records, people keep bringing those back.
Yeah, the records are cool. No, absolutely. But, there's some things you just don't go back to, right?
Yeah. I want to talk about some of these projects. I saw one on the slide, this crazy Europe underground.
Oh, yeah, let's actually go out to that.
And funny, as you're bringing that up, Gary, we actually had Bombardier on the
wrong?
show. Who was Bombardier was last spring, and
Yep.
they came on the show, and they were talking
A little
about
further, yes.
their underground systems for.
Okay, here we
Here we
go.
go.
Yeah, all right. So this is the Trans-Siberia project. Not just Trans-Siberia, called Trans-Bering project. And this is actually Interbering. See, it says source Washington Post, the Schiller Institute, Interbering 2016. So there's the Russians and the Chinese are totally interested in this. They're totally interested in funding this. We've been on the Trans-Siberia Railroad all the way east to where it ends right here, right now. They're actually proposing right now to build this track. They have it in their budget, actually, to build the track out to that point right there. And there's only a limited amount of track that needs to be built, primarily actually in Canada, connecting up into Alaska. There's definitely
so some
track.
of it's the infrastructure, some of it's already there.
Oh, yeah, a lot of it's there. It's actually a very little bit of connecting that has to be done. But the bottom line is that this sees there's the proposed Canadian segment, there's proposed, and there's the rest of it right there. And we'll have to enlarge this to actually see it. But
Yeah,
here's
we'll bring
the
it up
most
on the
important
thing,
thing.
yeah.
The most important thing is that we have the technology, we have the resources. The Russians and the Chinese are all over funding it on their side, which is much more of the work, to actually build an intercontinental railway system that would be a combination of high-speed trains and freight trains. It could all be zero-emission electric. That would totally connect the old world and the new world. Okay, and it's perfectly feasible. As I recall, the Bering project. It's 60 miles of underground tunnel or a bridge. It's like $60 billion. It's an infrastructure project. And a country could take on, let alone internationally could take on, right? And let alone, well, if you got Wall Street and the European markets just fund it privately, right?
Yeah.
So, and what that would enable is, first of all, it would enable the movement of agricultural goods like the Canadian wheat to China. It would enable all the tourist people that don't want to fly and that don't want to go by ship. We don't want to go by ship anymore. To sit on a train. I love trains. And go to Paris.
I just got back from Japan. It was just the train system. It's amazing.
Yeah, all right. It's basically, it's almost inevitable as long as we can just maintain peace between all the different countries and just work this out in terms of global economic integration. So we've been promoting that. We promoted that in Silicon Valley. The issue is when in the United States, North America, people are like, what? What's that? In Asia, they're like, yeah, we know all about that. We're building that.
Yeah.
Here, they're like, oh, yeah, what are you smoking?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not smoking anything. I'm like, that's inevitable, dudes. So anyway.
Sounds so unrealistic.
Yeah, but we want to make that in our lifetimes. We want to see that happen.
Oh, that would
Absolutely.
be fantastic.
So are you talking? Is there potential and talk of this for in between large waterways? Like, are we talking about training underground, or
well,
is
no,
that sort of
remember
off
the
the
Bering
radar?
Strait where we walked. When people came to the New World for the first time, it was during this glacial period, and this was actually the sea levels were much lower, and you could walk. The continents were connected.
Yeah.
There's only 60 miles that separates it. And it's very shallow water that separates the new and the old world right there. So
Right.
that tunnel goes through that close point, and there's actually 3 islands halfway through. So you don't even have to, in the middle of it, you actually come above ground again. So it's actually segments. It's like a 30-mile segment and a 30-mile segment and some short segments. So it's not an engineering problem. It's just a matter of a political problem of actually just getting it done, right? Okay,
Right.
investment in political. So we're promoting it because it would be great to be able to move all this stuff via electric rail.
Yeah.
Between the continents, in addition to inside the continents.
Yeah. And people.
And people, yes, and
Yeah.
people, and also, and we're not even talking about like putting in the Hyperloop system. And one of our clients in our previous company was an airline pilot who developed the Hyperloop system map for the whole world, and we published it because he wanted to see this 5,000-mile-an-hour super train that connected the entire continents.
And I think they're building that in.
Yeah, they're building segments of it, but that's like futuristic, and we're just talking about regular trains and maglev train technology that's been around 50 years here.
Yeah.
We don't have to go to Hyperloop. Hyperloop can follow it eventually.
Yeah.
But then it's 5,000 miles an hour. You don't see anything. You
Yeah.
just like zip, and you're like in a spaceship, and it decelerates, and you're in Moscow.
That's
it's
right.
like get off, and I
It's
just
not
got
the
on.
same.
Yeah.
Too fast.
Yeah.
I think the whole point of
Yeah.
traveling on a train
Yeah.
is to see everything, right?
Yeah,
Is to
exactly.
see the beauty of the world.
That's right.
But you said, I think you mentioned, I mean, they're using this.
Oh
is
yeah, no, whole
around.
segments of this all over. First of all, the China is investing right now $1 trillion in connecting into the interior like this through Kazakhstan, etc. They've already shipped the first goods from China to England this way because it's
Yep.
actually much safer and faster than sending it around. Like they can send it in 14 days on the existing train network. So that this is already in progress. This is all in. This infrastructure over here is all in place. I've been on it. That's the Trans-Siberian Railroad. It's fantastic. There's actually 2 tracks, one here and one here. So we're just talking about this part of it right here, and a little bit in Alaska, and a part right here in Canada. The rest of it's all built. So it's connecting it. It's
Yeah.
connecting the rail systems.
But
Most of that stuff was
that-
done in the 19th century.
This section up here, though, that politically, that's going to be the tough one.
Yeah, and also, the environment community will be worried about the
Yeah.
exploitation of resources up there. There's a bunch of things. Mostly it's a matter of relations between Russia and the United States. That's the big one. It's just having good relations between Russia and the United States.
For a sustained period of time while
Yeah,
this
and
all gets.
I'm married. I'm a product of the peace and prosperity after the fall of the Soviet Union, funded by all these forward-looking people in Washington and in New York who sent me to Russia, to the Soviet Union again and again. And so I know all these scientists, and I'm married to a Russian, and so I don't have any troubles with the Russians. I know the Russians well, but it's just a matter of politics. And the Russians are ready when they're ready. You want to sign in something? We'll sign. They're just like, okay, you want to growl? We'll growl.
Yeah.
So, but they're all there, mostly raising their children and drinking vodka and producing a lot of organic food and waiting for us to come to our senses and say, let's shake hands again. Let's
Yeah.
build a train.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's, and I don't when I come back from a trip and I'll get asked things about a country, and I go there sometimes not realizing, and it's just so much of it is education that people just don't, especially if you haven't traveled, you can't understand how do I say it, the differences that people think that we have are usually not, but the difference is that or the way that they think we're the same are actually the opposite. Like I found in Japan, there are certain elements that I thought would be different, but I found, no, I integrate fine into here. But then there was other things I just didn't see coming that were just different. The way that they follow systems. In the train, I went to slide a train open. And in Vancouver, if you go to hold the door open, a guard might even help you. They got your hand on their shoulder, they're pulling you back, right? And so there's these differences. And I don't know how we approach it. I guess on a political level, that's about or in business. Those are kind of the 2 platforms you can do it, because individuals, unless you're traveling to these countries, I don't really think you can understand that Russia is growing a whole bunch of organic food. I mean, where are you going to get that information? Why would you get that
Why
information?
would you know? No, it's very important to travel as much as you can because you're constantly understanding other cultures, again, how similar they are, understanding what the world looks like from the perspective of those people. But I can tell you that having been traveling to Russia since late Soviet times, when it was in depression and it was terrible, it was hopeless, the Russians are doing so much better than ever before. They've just built the interstate highway system, like in the 1950s in the United States. They've just built the first high-speed highway system. They've rebuilt all their infrastructure. The sports stadiums are all new. If you fly over it, it's just construction as far as the eye can see, and this is under sanctions. They're thriving. They're building kindergartens, schools. There's lots of young children again because there was a depression. There was no children for a while. It was really scary. They just couldn't afford to have children. So they're doing really well. The only thing right now is just internationally is just removing the sanctions, et cetera, and just restoring good relations. But internally and agriculturally, the agricultural output hasn't been seen since the revolution. They're competing on the world stage and outproducing wheat. Everyone is afraid of them, how fast they're producing wheat.
Yeah.
And they're totally non-GMO, and they're totally focused on organic food, leading the world in organic food, which is like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're seeing that in places like Africa where it's initial development, things like fiber optic. They're of course not going to lay the old cables in the ground. They're going to do fiber. So all of a sudden, the countries Russia's more advanced than in Africa, but in Africa, the development they're doing, that's the initial investment. So it ends up being the most up to date.
Yep.
Whereas Canada, now you have infrastructure issues because you try to lay fiber into a place like New West. You got to integrate into all these systems. And even if you lay it here, well, that doesn't necessarily mean you got to get fiber over there and all that sort of stuff. And that's the challenge of
Exactly.
developed countries are going to run into
That's
now.
exactly right.